بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون.
I created not jinn and mankind, except that they might worship me. According to the meaning of this mighty verse, the purpose for the sending of man to this world and the wisdom implicit in it consists of recognizing the Creator of all beings and believing in Him and worshiping Him.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم تسبح له السماوات السبع والأرض ومن فيهن وإن من شيء إلا يسبح بحمده ولكن لا تفقهون تسبيحهم إنه كان حليما غفورا.
In the name of God, the Merciful, the Compassionate. The seven heavens and the earth and all that is in them extol and glorify Him, and there is nothing but glorifies Him with praise. But you understand not their glorifying. Indeed, He is most forbearing, most forgiving. Since this sublime verse, like many other Quranic verses, mentions first the heavens, that brilliant page proclaiming God's unity, gazed on at all times and by all men with wonder and joy, in its pronouncement of the Creator of this cosmos, let us too begin with a mention of the heavens. Indeed, every voyager who comes to the hospice and the realm of this world opens his eyes and wonders who is the master of this fine hospice, which resembles a most generous banquet. A most ingenious exhibition. A most impressive camp and training ground. A most amazing and wondrous place of recreation. A most profound and wise place of instruction. He asks himself, too, who is the author of this great book? And who is the monarch of this lofty realm? There first presents itself to him the beautiful face of the heavens, inscribed with the gilt lettering of the stars. That face calls him, saying, "Look at me, and I shall guide you to what you seek." He looks then and sees a manifestation of dominicality performing various tasks in the heavens. It holds aloft in the heavens, without any supporting pillar, hundreds of thousands of heavenly bodies. Some of them are 1,000 times heavier than the earth, and revolve 70 times faster than a cannonball. It causes them to move in harmony and swiftly, without colliding with each other. It causes innumerable lamps to burn constantly, without the use of oil. It disposes of these great masses without any disturbance or disorder. It sets sun and moon to work at their respective tasks, without those great bodies ever rebelling. It administers with an infinite space, the magnitude of which cannot be measured in figures should they stretch from pole to pole, all that exists, at the same time, with the same strength, in the same fashion, manner, and mold, without the least deficiency. It reduces to submissive obedience to its law all the aggressive powers inherent in those bodies. It cleanses and lustrates the face of the heavens, removing all the sweepings and refuse of that vast assembly. It causes those bodies to maneuver like a disciplined army. And then, making the earth revolve, it shows the heavens each night and each year in a different form, like a cinema screen displaying the true and imaginative scenes to the audience of creation. There is within this dominical activity a truth consisting of subjugation, administration, revolution, ordering, cleansing, and employment. This truth, with its grandeur and comprehensiveness, bears witness to the necessary existence and unity of the Creator of the heavenly, and testifies to that existence being more manifest than that of the heavens. Hence it was said in the first degree of the first station, "There is no God but God, the necessary being, to whose necessary existence in unity the heavens and all they contain testify. Through the testimony of the sublimity, of the comprehensiveness of the truth of subjugation, administration, revolution, ordering, cleansing, and employment. A truth vast and perfect, and to be observed." Then that wondrous place of gathering known as space, or the atmosphere, begins thunderously to proclaim to that traveler come as a guest to the world, "Look at me. You can discover and find through me the object of your search, the one who sent you here." The traveler looks at the sour but kind face of the atmosphere, and listening to the awesome but joyous thunderclaps, perceives the following. The clouds, suspended between the sky and the earth, water the garden of the world in the most wise and merciful fashion, furnish the inhabitants of the earth with the water of life, modify the natural heat of life, and hasten to bestow aid wherever it is needed. In addition to fulfilling these and other duties, the vast clouds, capable of filling the heavens, sometimes hide themselves, with their parts retiring to rest, so that not a trace can be seen, just like a well-disciplined army, showing and hiding itself in accordance with sudden orders. Then, the very instant the command is given to pour down rain, the clouds gather in 1 hour, or rather in a few minutes. They fill the sky and await further orders from their commander. Next, the traveler looks at the wind in the atmosphere and sees that the air is employed wisely and generously in such numerous tasks that it is as if each of the inanimate atoms of that unconscious air were hearing and noting the orders coming from that monarch of the universe. Without neglecting a single one of them, it performs them in ordered fashion and through the power of the monarch. Thereby it gives breath to all beings and conveys to all living things the heat, light, and electricity they need, and transmits sound as well as aiding in the pollination of plants. The traveler then looks at the rain and sees that within those delicate, glistening, sweet drops, sent from a hidden treasury of mercy, there are so many compassionate gifts and functions contained, that it is as if mercy itself were assuming shape and flowing forth from the dominical treasury in the form of drops. It is for this reason that rain has been called mercy. Next, the traveler looks at the lightning and listens to the thunder, and sees that both of these, too, are employed in wondrous tasks. Then, taking his eyes off these, he looks to his own intellect and says, "The inanimate, lifeless cloud that resembles carded cotton has, of course, no knowledge of us. When it comes to our aid, it is not because it takes pity on us. It cannot appear and disappear without receiving orders. Rather, it acts in accordance with the orders of a most powerful and compassionate commander. First it disappears without leaving a trace, then suddenly reappears in order to begin its work. By the command and power of a most active and exalted, a most magnificent and splendid monarch, it fills and then empties the atmosphere, inscribing the sky with wisdom and erasing the pattern. It makes of the sky a tablet of effacement and affirmation, a depiction of the gathering and the resurrection. By the contriving of a most generous and bountiful, a most munificent and solicitous sustainer, a ruler who regulates and disposes, it mounts the wind, and taking with it treasures of rain, each as heavy as a mountain, hastens to the aid of the needy. It is as if it were weeping over them in pity, with its tears causing the flowers to smile. Tempering the heat of the sun, spraying gardens with water, and washing and cleansing the face of the earth. That wandering traveler then tells his own intellect, "These hundreds of thousands of wise, merciful, and ingenious tasks and acts of generosity and mercy that arise from the veil and outer form of this inanimate, lifeless, unconscious, volatile, unstable, stormy, unsettled, and inconstant air, clearly establish that this diligent wind, this tireless servant, never acts of itself, but rather in accordance with the orders of a most powerful and knowing, a most wise and generous commander." It is as if each particle were aware of every single task, like a soldier understanding and hearkening to every order of its commander. For it hears and obeys every dominical command that courses through the air. It aids all animals to breathe and to live, all plants to pollinate and grow, and cultivates all the matter necessary for their survival. It directs and administers the clouds, makes possible the voyaging of sailing ships, and enables sounds to be conveyed, particularly by means of wireless, telephone, telegraph, and radio, as well as numerous other universal functions. Now these atoms, each composed of two such simple materials as hydrogen and oxygen, and each resembling the other, exist in hundreds of thousands of different fashions all over the globe. I conclude, therefore, that they are being employed and set to work in the utmost orderliness by a hand of wisdom. As the verse makes clear, and the disposition of the winds and the clouds, held in disciplined order between the heavens and the earth. The one who, through the disposition of the winds, employs them in countless dominical functions, who through the ordering of the clouds uses them in infinite tasks of mercy, and who creates the air in this fashion, such a one can only be the possessor of necessary existence, the one empowered over all things, and knowledgeable of all things, the sustainer endowed with glory and generosity. This is the conclusion our traveler now draws. Then he looks at the rain and sees that within it are contained benefits as numerous as the raindrops, and dominical manifestations as multiple as the particles of rain, and instances of wisdom as plentiful as its atoms. Those sweet, delicate, and blessed drops are moreover created in so beautiful and ordered a fashion that particularly the rain sent in the summertime is dispatched and caused to fall with such balance and regularity that not even stormy winds that cause large objects to collide can destroy its equilibrium and order. The drops do not collide with each other or merge in such fashion as to become harmful masses of water. Water, composed of two simple elements like hydrogen and oxygen, is employed in hundreds of thousands of otherwise purposeful tasks and arts, particularly in animate beings. Although it is itself inanimate and unconscious, rain, which is then the very embodiment of divine mercy, can only be manufactured in the unseen treasure of mercy of one most compassionate and merciful, and on its descent expounds in physical form the verse, "And he it is who sends down rain after men have despaired, and thus spreads out his mercy." The traveler next listens to the thunder and watches the lightning. He understands that these two wondrous events in the atmosphere are like a material demonstration of the verse, "The thunder glorifies his praise." The brilliance of his lightning almost robs them of their sight. They also announce the coming of rain, and thus give glad tidings to the needy. Yes, this sudden utterance of a miraculous sound by the atmosphere, the filling of the dark sky with the flash and fire of lightning, the setting alight of the clouds that resemble mountains of cotton or pipes bursting with water and snow, these and similar phenomena are like a blow struck on the head of the negligent man whose gaze is directed down at the earth. They tell him, "Lift up your head. Look at the miraculous deeds of the most active and powerful being who wishes to make himself known." In the same way that you are not left to your own devices, so too these phenomena and events have a master and a purpose. Each of them is caused to fulfill a particular task, and each is employed by a most wise disposer. The wondering traveler hears then the lofty and manifest testimony to the truth that is composed of the disposition of the winds, the descent of the rains, and the administration of the events of the atmosphere, and says, "I believe in God." That which was stated in the second degree of the first station expresses the observations of the traveler concerning the atmosphere. There is no God but God, the necessary being, to whose necessary existence in unity the atmosphere and all it contains testifies, through the testimony of the sublimity of the comprehensiveness of the truth of subjugation, disposal, causing to descend, and regulation, a truth vast and perfect, and to be observed. Next, the globe addresses that thoughtful traveler, now growing a accustomed to his reflective journey. Why are you wandering through the heavens, through space and sky? Come, I will make known to you what you are seeking. Look at the functions that I perform, and read my pages. He looks and sees that the globe, like an ecstatic Mevlevi dervish with its twofold motion, is tracing out around the field of the supreme gathering a circle that determines the succession of days, years, and seasons. It is a most magnificent dominical ship, loaded with the hundreds of thousands of different forms of food and equipment needed for all animate beings, floating with the utmost equilibrium in the ocean of space and circling the sun. He then looks at the pages of the earth and sees that each page of each of its chapters proclaims the sustainer of the earth in thousands of verses. Being unable to read the whole of it, he looks at the page dealing with the creation and deployment of animate beings in the spring and observes the following. The forms of the countless members of hundreds of thousands of species emerge in the utmost precision from a simple material and are then nurtured in the most merciful fashion. Then, in miraculous manner, wings are given to some of the seeds. They take to flight and are thus dispersed. They are most effectively distributed, most carefully fed and nurtured. Countless tasty and delicious forms of food, in the most merciful and tender fashion, are brought forth from dry clay and from roots, seeds, and drops of liquid that differ little among each other. Every spring, 100,000 kinds of food and equipment are loaded on it from an unseen treasury, as if onto a railway wagon, and are dispatched in utmost orderliness to animate beings. The sending to infants of canned milk in those food packages, and pumps of sugared milk in the form of their mothers' affectionate breasts, is in particular such an instance of solicitousness, mercy, and wisdom, that it immediately establishes itself as a most tender manifestation of the mercy and generosity of the merciful and compassionate one. In short, this living page of spring displays 100,000 examples and samples of the supreme gathering, and is a tangible demonstration of this verse. So, look to the signs of God's mercy, how he gives life to the earth after its death. For verily, he it is who gives life to the dead, and he has power over all things. Moreover, this verse may be said to express in miraculous fashion the meanings of the page that is spring. The traveler thus understood that the earth proclaims through all its pages, in fashion proportionate to their size, there is no God but he. In expression of the meaning beheld by the traveler through the brief testimony of one of the 20 aspects of a single page out of more than 20 pages of the globe, it was said in the third degree of the first station, there is no God but God, the necessary being, to whose necessary existence in unity the earth with all that is in it and upon it testifies, through the testimony of the sublimity of the comprehensiveness of the truth of subjugation, disposition, nurturing, opening, distribution of seeds, protection, administration, the giving of life to all animate beings, compassion and mercy universal and general, a truth vast and perfect, and to be observed. Then that reflective traveler read each page of the cosmos. And as he did so, his faith, the key to felicity, strengthened. His gnosis, that key to spiritual progress, increased. His belief in God, the source and foundation of all perfection, developed 1 degree more. His joy and pleasure augmented and aroused his eagerness. And while listening to the perfect and convincing lessons given by the sky, the space, and the earth, he cried out for more. Then he heard the rapturous invocation of God made by the tumult of the seas and the great rivers, and listened to their sad yet pleasant sounds. In numerous ways they were saying to him, "Look at us. Read also our signs." Looking, our traveler saw the following. The seas, constantly and vitally surging, merging and pouring forth with an inclination to conquest inherent in their very nature, surrounded the earth, and together with the earth revolved extremely swiftly in a circle of 25,000 years in a single year. Yet the seas did not disperse, did not overflow or encroach on the land contiguous to them. They moved and stood still, and were protected by the command and power of a most powerful and magnificent being. Then looking to the depths of the sea, the traveler saw that apart from the most beautiful, well-adorned, and symmetrical jewels, there were thousands of different kinds of animals, sustained and ordered, brought to life, and caused to die, in so disciplined a fashion, their provision coming from mere sand and salt water, that it established irresistibly the existence of a powerful and glorious, a merciful and beauteous being, administering and giving life to them. The traveler then looks at the rivers and sees that the benefits inherent in them, the functions they perform, and their continual replenishment are inspired by such wisdom and mercy as indisputably to prove that all rivers, springs, streams, and great waterways flow forth from the treasury of mercy of the compassionate One, the Lord of glory and generosity. They are preserved and dispensed, indeed, in so extraordinary a fashion that it is said, 4 rivers flow forth from paradise. That is, they transcend by far apparent causes and flow forth instead from the treasury of a non-material paradise, from the superabundance of an unseen and inexhaustible source. For example, the blessed Nile, that turns the sandy land of Egypt into a paradise, flows from the mountains of the moon in the south, without ever being exhausted, as if it were a small sea. If the water that flowed down the river in 6 months were gathered together in the form of a mountain and then frozen, it would be larger than those waters. But the place in the mountains where the water is lodged and stored is less than 1/6 of their mass. As for the water that replenishes the river, the rain that enters the reservoir of the river is very sparse in that torrid region, and is quickly swallowed up by the thirsty soil. Hence, it is incapable of maintaining the equilibrium of the river. The tradition has thus grown up that the blessed Nile springs in miraculous fashion from an unseen paradise. This tradition has profound meaning and expresses a beautiful truth. The traveler saw, then, 1,000th part of the truths and affirmations contained in the oceans and rivers. The seas proclaim unanimously with a power proportionate to their extent, "There is no God but He," and produce as witness to their testimony all the creatures that inhabit them. This our traveler perceived. Expressing and conveying the testimony of the seas and the rivers, we said in the 4th degree of the first station, "There is no God but God, the necessary existent, to the necessity of whose existence in unity point all the seas and the rivers, together with all they contain by the testimony of the sublimity of the comprehensiveness of the truth of subjugation, preservation, storing up, and administration, vast and well ordered, and to be observed. Then the traveler is summoned on his meditative journey by the mountains and the plains. Read 2 our pages, they say. Looking, he sees that the universal function and duty of mountains is of such grandeur and wisdom as to stupefy the intelligence. The mountains emerge from the earth by the command of their sustainer, thereby palliating the turmoil, anger, and rancor that arise from disturbances within the earth. As the mountains surge upward, the earth begins to breathe. It is delivered from harmful tremors and upheavals, and its tranquility as it pursues its duty of rotation is no longer disturbed. In the same way that masts are planted in ships to protect them from turbulence and preserve their balance, so too mountains are set up on the deck of the ship that is the earth, as masts and stores, as indicated by verses in the Qur'an of miraculous exposition, such as these. And the mountains as pegs. And we have cast down anchors. And the mountains, he anchored them. Then too there are stored up and preserved in the mountains all kinds of springs, waters, minerals, and other materials needed by animate beings, in such wise, skillful in generous and foreseeing a fashion, that they prove that they are the storehouses and warehouses and servants of one possessing infinite power, one possessing infinite wisdom. Deducing from these 2 examples the other duties and instances of wisdom, as great as mountains, of the mountains and plains, the traveler sees through the general instances of wisdom in them, and particularly in regard to the fashion in which all manner of things are stored up in them providentially, the testimony they give, and the divine unity they proclaim, declaring, "There is no God but He," a declaration as powerful and firm as the mountains, and vast and expansive as the plains. And he too says, "I believe in God." In expression of this meaning, it was said in the 5th degree of the 1st station, "There is no God but God, to the necessity of whose existence point all the mountains and plains together with what is in them and upon them, by the testimony of the sublimity, of the comprehensiveness, of the truth, of the storing up, administration, dissemination of seed, preservation, and regulation, a truth providential, dominical, vast, general, well-ordered and perfect, and to be observed." Then, while that traveler was traveling in his mind through the mountains and plains, the gate to the arboreal and vegetable realm was opened before him. He was summoned inside. "Come," they said, "inspect our realm and read our inscriptions." Entering, he saw that a splendid and well-adorned assembly for the proclamation of God's unity, and a circle for the mentioning of his names and the offering of thanks to him had been drawn up. He understood, for the very appearance of all trees and plants, that different species were proclaiming unanimously, "There is no God but He." For he perceived three great and general truths, indicating and proving that all fruit-giving trees and plants, with the tongue of their symmetrical and eloquent leaves, the phrases of their charming and loquacious flowers, the words of their well-ordered and well-spoken fruits, were testifying to God's glory and bearing witness that there is no God but He. The first. In the same way that in each of the plants and trees a deliberate bounty and generosity is to be seen in most obvious fashion, and a purposive liberality and munificence, so too it is to be seen in the totality of the trees and plants, with the brilliance of sunlight. The second. The wise and purposive distinction and differentiation, one that cannot in any way be attributed to chance, the deliberate and merciful adornment and giving forth of form, all of this is to be seen as clearly as daylight in the infinite varieties and species. They show themselves to be the works and embroideries of an all-wise Maker. The third. The opening and unfolding of all the separate members of the 100,000 species of that infinite realm, each in its own distinct fashion and shape, in the utmost order, equilibrium, and beauty, from well-defined, limited, simple, and solid seeds and grains, identical to each other or nearly so, they're emerging from those seeds in distinct and separate form with utter equilibrium, vitality, and wise purpose without the least error or mistake, is a truth more brilliant than the sun. The witnesses proving this truth are as numerous as the flowers, fruits, and leaves that emerge in the spring. So the traveler said, "Praise be to God for the blessings of belief." In expression of these truths and the testimony given to them, we said in the 6th degree of the first station, "There is no God but God, to the necessity of whose existence and unity points the consensus of all the species of trees and plants that are engaged in glorifying God, and speak with the eloquent and well-ordered words of their leaves, their loquacious and comely flowers, their well-ordered and well-spoken fruits, by the testimony of the sublimity of the comprehensiveness of the truth of bestowal, bounty, and generosity, done in purpose of mercy, and the truth of differentiation, adornment and decoration, done with will and wisdom." Definite, too, is the indication given by the truth of the opening of all their symmetrical, adorned, distinct, variegated, and infinite forms, from seeds and grains that resemble and approximate each other, that are finite and limited. As this traveler through the cosmos proceeded on his meditative journey with increased eagerness and a bouquet of gnosis and faith, itself like a spring, gathered from the garden of the spring, there opened before his truth-perceiving intellect, his cognitive reason, the gate to the animal and bird realm. With hundreds of thousands of different voices and various tongues, he was invited to enter. Entering, he saw that all the animals and birds, in their different species, groups, and nations, were proclaiming silently and aloud, "There is no God but He," and had thus turned the face of the earth into a vast place of invocation, an expansive assembly for the proclamation of God's glory. He saw each of them to be like an ode dedicated to God, a word proclaiming His glory, a letter indicating His mercy, each of them describing the Maker and offering Him thanks and encomium. It was as if the senses, powers, members, and instruments of those animals and birds were orderly and balanced words, or perfect and disciplined expressions. He observed three great and comprehensive truths, indicating in decisive form their offering of thanks to the Creator and Provider, and their testimony to His unity. The first, their being brought into existence with wisdom and purpose, and their creation full of art in a fashion that in no way can be attributed to chance, to blind force, or inanimate nature. Their being created and composed in purposive and knowledgeable manner. Their animation in being given life in a way that displays in 20 aspects the manifestation of knowledge, wisdom, and will. All of this is a truth that bears witness to the necessary existence of the eternally living and self-subsistent. His 7 attributes and unity, a witness repeated to the number of all animate beings. The second, there appears from this a truth so vast and powerful that none other than the one powerful over all things, the one knowledgeable of all things, could lay claim to it. This comprehensive act, which displays in every respect thousands of wonders and instances of wisdom, it is impossible and precluded that anything other than such a one could lay claim to it. The third, the emergence and unfolding of those countless creatures and their hundreds of thousands of different shapes and forms, each of which is a miracle of wisdom. Their emergence from eggs and drops of water called sperm that are identical with each other or closely resemble each other and are limited and finite in number. All of this, in the most orderly, symmetrical, and unfailing fashion, is so brilliant a truth as to be illumined with proofs and evidences as numerous as the animals themselves. By the consensus of these three truths, all the species of animals are engaged together in testifying that there is no God but He. It is as if the whole earth, like a great man, were saying, "There is no God but He," in a manner benefiting its vastness and conveying its testimony to the dwellers of the heavens. The traveler saw this and understood it perfectly. In expression of these truths, we said in the 7th degree of the first station, there is no God but God, to whose necessary existence in unity points the consensus of all animals and birds that praise God and bear witness to Him with the words of their senses, their faculties and powers, words well balanced, ordered, and eloquent, with the words of their limbs and members, words perfect and persuasive, by the testimony of the sublimity and the comprehensiveness of the truth of bringing into being, making and creating, according to will, the truth of distinction and decoration, according to purpose, and the truth of proportioning and forming, according to wisdom. Definite, too, is the indication given by the truth of the opening of all their orderly, distinct, variegated, and infinite forms, out of identical or similar eggs and drops of sperm that are finite and limited. The second truth, the absoluteness, the comprehensiveness, and appearance in infinite form of the dominical deeds seen at work in the cosmos. It is only God's wisdom and will that limits and restricts these deeds, as well as the inherent capacities of the objects and places in which they manifest themselves. Stray chance, dumb nature, blind force, unconscious causality, and the elements that without restriction are scattered in every direction. None of these can have any part in the most balanced, wise, perspicacious, life-giving, orderly, and firm deeds of the Creator. They are used rather by the command, will, and power of the glorious doer as an apparent veil to conceal his power. We will set forth three from among the numerous subtle points that relate to the three deeds indicated in three continuous verses in Surah Al-Nahl. The first, your sustainer inspired in the bee that it should seek a dwelling place in the mountains. The bee is, with respect to its disposition and function, such a miracle of God's power that a whole surah, Surah Al-Nahl, has been named after it. For to inscribe to the minute head of that little honey machine a complete program for the fulfillment of its important task, to place in its diminutive stomach the most delicious of foods and to ripen it there, to place in its sting poison capable of destroying and killing animate beings without causing any harm to its own body or to the member in question, to do all this without the utmost care and knowledge, with exceeding wisdom and purposiveness, partakes of a perfect orderliness and equilibrium, and hence unconscious, disorderly, disequilibrated nature and accident could never interfere or participate in any of this. The appearance and comprehensiveness of this divine craft, this dominical deed, which is miraculous in three separate respects, and the countless bees that are found scattered over the earth with the same wisdom, the same care, the same symmetry, at the same time, and in the same fashion, this is self-evident proof of God's unity. The second verse, there is for you a lesson in cattle. From what is within their bodies, between excretions of blood, we produce for your drink milk, pure and agreeable to those who drink it. This verse is a decree overflowing with useful instruction. To place in the nipples of cows, camels, goats, and sheep, as well as human mothers, in the midst of blood and excrement, but without being polluted by them, a substance the exact opposite, pure, clean, pleasant, nutritive and white milk, and to inspire in their hearts tenderness toward their young that is still more pleasant, sweeter and more valuable than milk. This requires such a degree of mercy, wisdom, knowledge, power, will, and care that it cannot in any way be the work of turbulent chance, of the tangled elements, or of blind forces. The manifestation, workings, and comprehensiveness of so miraculous a dominical act and so wise a divine deed over all the face of the globe, in the countless hearts and breasts of innumerable mothers, of hundreds, of thousands of species, in the same instant, the same fashion, with the same wisdom and the same care. This too constitutes a self-evident proof of God's unity. The third verse, from the fruits of the date palm and the vine you take sugar and fine nourishment. Verily therein is a sign for a people possessing intelligence. This verse invites our attention to the date and to grapes, saying, for those of intelligence, there is great proof, argument, and evidence of the divine unity in these two fruits. These two fruits yield nurture and sustenance, fresh and dry fruit, and give rise to most delicious forms of food. Yet the trees that bear them stand in waterless sand and dry soil, and are thus miracles of power and wonders of wisdom. They are each of them like a factory producing sweet sugar, a machine manufacturing honey-like syrup, a work of art created with perfect order and sensitive balance, wisdom, and care. Hence anyone with a grain of intelligence will say on contemplating them, the one who made them in this fashion may very well be the creator of the whole cosmos. For in front of our eyes, each vine branch the thickness of a finger will hold 20 bunches of grapes, and each bunch will in turn contain hundreds of sugary grapes, each like a little pump emitting syrup. To clothe the surface of each grape with a fine, delicate, thin, and colorful protection, to place in its delicate and soft hard seeds with their hard shells, which are like its retentive faculty, program, and the story of its life, to manufacture in its stomach a sweetmeat like the helva of paradise, a honey like the water of Kawthar, to create an infinite number of such grapes over the face of the entire earth with the same care and wisdom and wonderful art, and at the same time and in the same fashion. This proves in self-evident fashion that the one who fulfills these tasks is the creator of the whole cosmos. And this deed, requiring as it does infinite power and infinite wisdom, can only be his deed. Yes, blind and stray, disorderly and unconscious, aimless, aggressive, and anarchic forces, nature and causality, cannot have anything to do with this most sensitive balance, this most skillful art, this most wise scheme. They cannot even stretch out their hands toward it. It falls to them only to be employed through the dominical command as passive objects, as curtain holders. Just like the 3 points proving divine unity contained in the 3 truths indicated in the 3 verses, the countless manifestations and workings of infinite dominical deeds attest unanimously to the unity of a single one in unity, the all-glorious One. The first truth, the truth of opening. That is, the opening up from a single simple substance of innumerable varied and separate forms, together, everywhere, in a single instant and by a single deed, through the manifestation of the name of the opener. Yes, in the same way that God's creative power has opened up innumerable beings like flowers in the garden of the cosmos, and endowed each with an orderly form and distinct identity. Through the manifestation of the name of Opener, so too, although in more miraculous fashion, he has given to the 400,000 species of animate beings in the garden of the earth, each its symmetrical, adorned, and distinct form. He creates you in the wombs of your mothers, creation after creation, in 3 darknesses. That is God, your sustainer. His is the sovereignty. There is no God other than He. Where then will you turn? Naught is hidden from God, neither on earth nor in the heavens. He it is who forms you in the wombs as He wills. There is no God but He, the mighty, the wise. As these 2 verses indicate, the strongest proof of divine unity and the most remarkable miracle of divine power is God's opening up of forms. Because the opening of forms is repeatedly established and expounded in different ways elsewhere in the Risale-i Nur, and particularly in the 6th and 7th degrees of the 1st chapter of the 2nd station of this treatise, we refer the discussion of this matter to those places and restrict ourselves here to the following. According to the testimony of botany and biology, based on profound research, there is in the opening and unfolding of forms such comprehensiveness and artistry that other than a single and unique one absolutely powerful, able to see and do all things in all things, no one can understand this comprehensive and all-embracing deed. For this deed of the unfolding of forms demands a wisdom, an attention, and a comprehensiveness that are present at all times and are contained within an infinite power. This power, in turn, can be found only in that unique being who administers the whole cosmos. As is decreed in the above quoted verses, God's attribute of opening, expressed in the opening and creation of the forms of men from their mother's wombs, within three darknesses, separately with equilibrium, distinctness, and order, without any error, confusion, or mistake. This truth of the unfolding of the forms of all men and animals all over the earth with the same power, the same wisdom, and the same artistry is a most powerful proof of God's unity. For to comprehend and embrace all things is itself a form of unity that leaves no room for the assignation of partners to God. Just as the 19 truths of the first chapter bearing witness to the necessary existence of God also attest to the existence of the Creator through their own existence, so too they bear witness to his unity through their comprehensiveness. Our traveler then saw the second truth in the third stopping place. The third truth, the truth of disposing and administering. That is, to administer with complete order and equilibrium both the awesome and swift-moving heavenly bodies and imperious interfering elements and the needy, weak denizens of earth, to cause them to aid each other, to administer them jointly with each other, to take all necessary measures concerning them, and to make this vast world like a perfect kingdom, a magnificent city, a well-adorned palace. Leaving aside the vast spheres of this imperious and merciful administration, since it is explained and proved in important sections of the Risale-i, such as the 10th word, we will show by means of a comparison a single page and stage of that administration as it manifests itself in the spring on the face of the earth. Let us suppose, for example, that some wondrous world conqueror assembled an army from 400,000 different groups and nationalities, and supplied the clothes and weapons, the instructions and dismissals and salaries of every group and nationality, separately and variously, without any defect or shortcoming, without error or mistake, at the proper time, without any delay or confusion, with the utmost regularity, and in most perfect form. No cause other than the extraordinary power of that wondrous commander could stretch out its hand to attempt that vast, complex, subtle, balanced, multitudinous, and just administration. Were it to stretch out its hand, it would destroy the equilibrium and cause confusion. So too we see with our own eyes that an unseen hand creates and administers every spring a magnificent army composed of 400,000 different species. In the autumn, an example of the day of resurrection, it dismisses 300,000 out of those 400,000 species of plants and animals from their duties, and they go on leave through the activity of death and in the name of decease. In spring, a sample of the gathering that follows resurrection, it constructs 300,000 examples of raising from the dead in the space of a few weeks with the utmost order and discipline. In the case of the tree, 4 such resurrections take place with respect to the tree itself, its leaves, its flowers, and its fruits. After showing spring to our eyes exactly like the preceding one, it gives each species and group in that army of glory that contains 400,000 different species its appropriate sustenance and provision, its defensive weapons and distinctive garments, its orders and dismissals, and all the tools and instruments it needs, with the utmost order and regularity, without error or slip, without confusion or omission, in unexpected fashion and at the proper time. It thus proves its unity, oneness, uniqueness, and infinite power and boundless mercy with perfection of dominicality, sovereignty and wisdom, and writes with the pen of divine determining this proclamation of divine unity on the face of the earth, on the page of every spring. After reading only a single page of this proclamation of one spring, our traveler said to himself, "The torment of hellfire is pure justice for those who commit the error of denying resurrection. For such denial would be to refute the numerous promises and to deny the power of one powerful and compelling, a wrathful one of glory, who has promised and assured all of his prophets thousands of times, and set forth in thousands of verses of the Qur'an, explicitly and by way of allusion, that he will bring about a resurrection and a gathering far easier for him than the thousands of miraculous gatherings that occur each spring, each more wondrous than the supreme gathering." His soul responded, "We believe in what." The fourth truth, which forms the 33rd degree, the truth of compassionateness and bestowal of provision. That is, the giving over the whole face of the globe, within the earth, in the air above it, and the ocean around it, to all animate beings, especially those endowed with spirit, and among them essentially the impotent, the weak, and the young, all of their necessary sustenance, material and immaterial, in the most solicitous manner, deriving from it dry and rude soil, from solid bone-like dry pieces of wood, and in the case of the most delicate of all forms of sustenance, from between blood and urine, at the proper time, in orderly fashion, without any omission or confusion, in front of our eyes, by an unseen hand. Yes, the verse, "God is the provider, the firm possessor of strength," restricts to God the task of sustaining and providing. And the verse, "There is no moving thing on earth but depends on God for its sustenance. He knows its resting place and storage place. All is in a book perspicacious," provides a dominical guarantee and pledge to furnish provision for all men and animals. Similarly, the verse, "The beasts do not carry their sustenance. God sustains them and you, and He is all-hearing, all-knowing," establishes and proclaims that it is God who guarantees and provides for all impotent, powerless, weak, and wretched creatures that are unable to secure their own sustenance in an unexpected fashion. Indeed, from the unseen, even out of nothing. It is He, for example, who provides for insects on the ocean bed and their young. This proclamation is directed in particular to those men who worship causes and are unaware that it is He who bestows provision from behind the veil of causality. Numerous other verses of the Qur'an and numerous pieces of cosmic evidence unanimously demonstrate that it is the compassionateness of a single glorious provider that nurtures all animate beings. Now the trees require a certain form of sustenance, but have neither power nor will. They remain therefore in their places, trusting in God, and their provision comes hastening to them. So too the sustenance of infants flows to their mouths from wondrous small pumps, aided by the solicitude and tenderness of their mothers. Then, when the infants acquire a little power and will, the milk ceases. These various instances clearly prove that licit sustenance is not proportionate to will and power, but comes in relation to weakness and impotence, which induce trust in God. Just as the Risale-i explains and proves the truth of the Qur'an in a way that is in conformity with the physical sciences, so it gives clear answers to the questions, what am I? Where did I come from? Where will I go when I die? What are my true duties and functions? Where do other beings come from, and where will they go? What are they in reality? It explains these, the most important matters facing everyone, convincingly, with clarity, and in an attractive style, illuminating minds and spirits. In this age, the enemies of religion and Islam have put the weakening of the bases of belief at the top of their programs, especially this last 25 years. The many covert assaults on the pillars of belief and conspiracies against them have been terribly destructive. Doubt or denial concerning even one of the pillars of belief is very often more damaging than indifference toward the finer points of religion. This is why what takes priority at the present time is to transform belief by imitation into certain affirmative belief. By another name, belief by investigation. What is important now is to strengthen and to save belief. It has become absolutely essential to concentrate on the bases of belief. This is the most pressing need in the Islamic world today. What is the use of trying to restore and decorate the rooms of a building with collapsed foundations? Can a tree with rotten roots be revived by spraying its branches and leaves? The human being resembles a palace, the foundations of which are the pillars of belief. He resembles a tree whose roots are the principles of belief. The most important of the pillars of belief is belief in God Almighty, then belief in prophethood and the resurrection of the dead. This is why the knowledge people should strive most to acquire is knowledge about belief. Knowledge about the matters of belief is the highest sort of knowledge. Belief does not consist of a brief assent. It comprises numerous degrees. Belief by initiation may be easily overcome by the raging currents of misguidance of the present day, whereas certain affirmative belief is unshakable and inextinguishable. The person who attains to such belief will be steadfast and unwavering, even in the most violent storms. The most fanatically atheistic philosopher even will not be able to cause him doubts. It is because of this that what we give importance to is to persist in reading attentively and seriously books that teach us how to acquire certain affirmative belief, that strengthen our belief and will lead us to everlasting happiness. Otherwise, the calamitous maelstroms of the present will undoubtedly drag us down into the depths. Our only salvation is to cling to the commentary that expounds the verses of the Qur'an, which are about belief, and look to the present age. There are two sorts of Quranic commentaries. The first is the well-known kind of commentary. Commentaries of this sort expound and elucidate the Qur'an's phraseology, words, and sentences. The second sort explains, proves, and elucidates with powerful arguments the Qur'an's truths related to belief. This sort has great importance. Sometimes the well-known literal commentaries include the sort in summary fashion, but the Risale-i has made it its basis directly and is a commentary on the Qur'an's meanings, which silences obstinate philosophers in an unprecedented manner. The Risale-i is a work of several volumes that, for the edification of humanity, explains rationally and objectively the truths of the Holy Qur'an, which for 14 centuries has guided millions of people along the straight path. Now I am going to read a number of passages from the Risale-i about belief, the Qur'an, and the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be blessings and peace. As I read, there may be brothers and sisters who want further explanations. However, if asked, Ustad Bediüzzaman used to say this when reading to his students. The Risale-i Nur provides sufficient explanations of the questions of belief. The Risale-i Nur's teacher is the Risale-i Nur itself. It doesn't require other teachers. Each person can benefit from it in accordance with his capacity. Even if you don't understand everything completely with your mind, your spirits, hearts, and consciences all receive their share. The degree to which you benefit from it will be of great profit to you.